Your father won't be walking you down the aisle, Marin. Mom paused. Audrey can't handle feeling replaced. You're strong enough to walk alone. My sister said, "Don't make your little wedding ruin my gala." So I let her have a spotlight until Warren stood up and announced my $4.75 million contract. Mom then begged to give a toast. Too late. I stood in my greenhouse with pruning shears in one hand and a white orchid stem in the other. Outside, June wind moved through Bozeman, Montana. Inside, the air smelled of soil, beeswax, and lavender oil. My name is Marin Elise Whitlock. I was 31, 3 days from marrying Caleb Rourke, and old enough to know a mother's kindness could still leave bruises. I built Root and Ember botanicals from a potting bench behind my rental house. First, it was just me, a secondhand scale, lab notebooks, and balm cooling beside native herbs. Then a spa in Big Sky ordered from me. Then a boutique hotel asked for a custom serum. At home, my work was those little jars. Mom said it with a smile. Marin has always loved her plant hobbies. She made it sound small, like I was pressing flowers, not paying employees and negotiating contracts. Elaine Whitlock was beautiful in the country club way. Soft cashmere, pale nails, and a voice that never rose high enough to be accused of anything. She closed doors gently and left you outside. My father, Martin, was not loud or cruel. Dad simply looked wounded whenever he had to choose. When Mom hurt me, he lowered his eyes and said, "Your mother thinks this is best, honey." And then there was Audrey. Audrey Whitlock Barnes, my older sister, had been delicate since the day she realized delicacy worked. Mom called her my fragile girl. If Audrey cried, plans changed. If Audrey wanted the room became hers. I was the strong one. It sounded like praise until I noticed strong girls did not get held. Strong girls got the check, the blame, the smaller slice, and the job of understanding. Audrey married Grant Barnes 2 years earlier. Mom treated that marriage like a winning lottery ticket. Grant wore expensive suits and drove a spotless Porsche Macan. At dinner, he called my fiancé the trail guy because Caleb guided wilderness trips and wore flannel with mud on his boots. Caleb never corrected him. He did not need to prove himself to men who measured worth by the shine on a hood ornament. The orchid had come from Audrey that morning. White, elegant, expensive, and already dying because it had no roots. I stared at it while Mom explained that Audrey's marriage was under pressure. Grant's investors mattered, and my wedding had become emotionally complicated. Then Dad's voice came through the speaker. "Marin," he said, "I think your mother may be right. You've always been stronger than Audrey." There it was, the family hymn. For a second, I was 12 again, standing beside a blue ribbon for my state science project on native root systems. 2 front row chairs had been saved for my parents. Both stayed empty because Audrey had cheerleading tryouts. Mom had said, "Marin will understand. Audrey needs us more today." I had understood so many things that nobody ever had to apologize. My fingers tightened around the orchid stem until it snapped. I only said, "I understand, Dad." And for the first time, I did not mean I forgive you. I meant I see you. By the next morning, I had replayed Mom's call so many times that her words stopped sounding like words. They became furniture in the house I grew up in. Familiar, heavy, always in the way. Elaine Whitlock did not rule with slamming doors. She ruled with sighs, with glances across dining rooms, with sentences that began, "I just worry about Audrey." That was all it took. Audrey needed reassurance. So my birthday dinner moved to a night she felt better. Audrey hated being compared, so my college acceptance letter stayed folded on the kitchen counter while Mom talked about her breakup. Audrey had anxiety before family photos, so I gave her my appointment at the salon and pinned my own hair in the car. No one called it taking, they called it keeping peace. Dad was a master at standing near the fire without ever admitting there were flames. Martin Whitlock could fix a leaky pipe, rebuild a porch railing, and talk for 20 minutes about fly fishing weather. But when Mom decided I should give something up, his spine went soft. "She means well," he would say. That sentence raised me more than he did. Audrey learned the family system early. She did not have to demand much. She only had to look wounded, and the rest of us rushed around her like nurses around a patient no doctor had diagnosed. Grant made it worse. He arrived in our family with shiny cufflinks and the kind of confidence men borrow from unpaid bills. Mom adored him. She loved the way he said capital stack and private investors, as if those words proved Audrey had married into importance. At Sunday dinners, Grant took over the table. He talked about commercial development, equity partners, and real money. When my company came up, he smiled like a man petting a child's head. "So, Marin," he once said, slicing into prime rib Dad had smoked all afternoon, "how many little candles do you have to sell before you call it a business?" Audrey laughed too quickly. Mom gave me the look that meant, "Don't embarrass your sister's husband." Caleb, sitting beside me in a denim shirt with sunburn across his nose, simply reached for his water. Grant turned to him. "And you, Caleb? Still taking tourists up trails for tips?" "Mostly keeping people from doing stupid things near cliffs," Caleb said. The table went quiet for half a beat. Grant chuckled, but his eyes sharpened. "Cute." Caleb smiled in that calm way of his. Useful, too. That was Caleb. He never swung first. He just stood so steady that arrogant people tired themselves out trying to move him. To my family, he was too plain to be powerful. He drove an old Ford Bronco, owned more wool socks than dress shoes, and knew how to start a fire in wet weather. Mom called him grounded, with the same tone she used for limited. I loved him because silence did not scare him. Because when I spoke, he listened all the way to the end. Because he never treated my strength like an excuse to abandon me. Once, after dinner, he helped me load empty pie dishes into my car. Through the kitchen window, we could see Mom fussing over Audrey's coat while Dad held Grant's expensive leather briefcase. Caleb looked at me and said quietly, "Strong doesn't mean disposable." I laughed because I did not know what else to do, but his face stayed serious. "Marin," he said, "people who love you should not need you broken before they show up." I looked away before he could see how deeply that landed. Back then, I still believed my family could change if I explained myself clearly enough. I thought love was somewhere underneath all their unfairness, buried but alive. Now, 3 days before my wedding, with my father's place beside me handed over to Audrey's feelings, I began to understand something colder. Some families do not misunderstand your pain. They depend on your silence. The steakhouse sat on Main Street, all dark wood, low amber lights, and waiters who knew when to disappear. Outside, Bozeman still held the last gold of evening. Inside, Grant Barnes acted like he owned the room because the hostess recognized his jacket. He chose the head of the table without asking. Mom settled beside Audrey, touching her wrist like she was fragile glass. Dad sat across from me, studying the menu as if ribeye cuts required moral courage. Caleb pulled out my chair. Grant noticed. "Careful, Marin," he said. "You marry a wilderness guide, you might have to start tipping him for basic manners." Audrey laughed into her wine. Caleb only unfolded his napkin. "Manners are free, Grant. That's why some people forget their value."
Dad coughed. Mom's smile tightened.
The waiter brought dry-aged steaks, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus, and a bottle of Cabernet. Grant made a show of approving. He swirled his glass and began talking about his West Bozeman project like he was addressing shareholders. Retail on the ground floor, he said. Luxury apartments above. Walkable, modern.
Exactly what this town needs.
What's holding it up? Dad asked,
relieved to discuss anything that was not family. Grant leaned back. One stubborn old rancher. Owns the strip of land we need for access. Won't sign the easement. These dinosaur types think pasture is holy ground. Caleb cut a steak slowly. Some people don't measure progress by how much concrete they pour. Grant turned to him. That a trail philosophy? No, Caleb said.
Just common sense.
Audrey's eyes flicked between them. She loved tension when she was not the target. Mom stepped in with her velvet voice. Well, change is hard for some people. Grant nodded, grateful for the rescue. Exactly. Real money moves forward. Then Audrey set down her fork. Oh, she said too casually. Before I forget, Grant and I are hosting our anniversary gala on June 21st. My knife stopped against the plate.
June 21st was my wedding day. Audrey looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. His investors are only in town that weekend. We tried everything. She had not tried anything. I knew because Audrey always announced bad news after it was already decorated. Dad looked up. For 1 second, shame crossed his face. It was small, but I saw it. Elaine, he murmured. Mom placed her hand over Audrey's. A family can hold 2 joys in one day if everyone is gracious. There it was again, gracious. In our family, gracious meant Marin moves. I said, my ceremony starts at 4.
And ours begins at 7:30, Audrey replied. There's plenty of time. For whom? I asked. Mom's eyes warned me not to make a scene. Sweetheart, no one is taking anything from you. But they were. They always had. Only this time, they wanted the altar light still warm when Audrey walked into her applause. Grant lifted his glass. To a big weekend for the Whitlocks. Caleb did not raise his. After dinner, we stepped into the cool Montana air. Grant clicked his key fob. The Porsche Macan blinked under the lot lights, polished black and eager to impress. Someday, trail guy, Grant said, you'll understand the value of arriving properly. Caleb looked at the car, then at the temporary registration tucked near the windshield. Corporate lease out of Seattle? He asked mildly. Interesting choice for a local developer. Grant's face lost color so fast, even Audrey noticed.
For the first time all night, his smile had nowhere to stand. 10 days before the wedding, Mom sent a message to the family group chat at 7:16 in the morning. Please keep both my girls in your prayers this week. Audrey is under so much pressure, and Marin has been a little distant with all the wedding stress. I just want peace for everyone. It looked harmless. That was Elaine Whitlock's gift. She could light a match, place it gently on the curtains, and ask why the room smelled smoky. By noon, Aunt Linda texted me. Your mother's trying her best. Don't shut her out right now. Then my cousin Beth. Audrey has always felt things deeply. Maybe let her have this one? This one. As if my wedding day were a parking spot. I stared at my phone from the packing table inside Root and Ember, where 24 jars of Alpine Arnica Bomb waited for labels. My assistant Tessa was checking batch numbers beside me. She looked up when my phone buzzed for the 6th time. Everything okay? I almost said yes. Strong girls always said yes first. Instead, I turned the screen face down. Family weather. Tessa nodded like she understood storms could have last names.
I did not answer the messages. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I finally knew the courtroom Mom had built.
She would present herself as the worried mother, Audrey as the wounded sister, and me as the cold bride too proud to compromise. If I defended myself, I sounded guilty. If I stayed silent, she got to narrate me. So I chose a third thing. I made a folder on my phone and named it Receipts. Screenshots went in first. Mom's group message, Aunt Linda's warning, Beth's suggestion that I let my sister share the day I had booked a year in advance. Then came older things I had never saved because I had still been hoping memory would be enough. A birthday dinner moved because Audrey had a migraine after fighting with Grant. A holiday photo where Mom asked me to stand at the end because Audrey looked more balanced in the center. A message from Dad last Thanksgiving. Your mother says it would mean a lot if you paid for the catering up front. We'll settle later. They never settled. By evening, Mom called twice. I let both go to voicemail. Her message was soft enough to serve with tea. Marin, sweetheart, I hope you're not taking things the wrong way. I'm only trying to keep your sister from falling apart. You know how she gets. Yes, I knew how Audrey got. I also knew how everyone else got when Audrey got that way. Caleb came by after sunset with takeout from a diner near the highway. Chicken pot pie for me, black coffee for himself. He found me sitting on the greenhouse steps, phone in my lap, receipts glowing in the dark. He did not ask me to calm down. He sat beside me and said, "Keep them." I looked at him. That sounds ugly. No, he said. Ugly is making you prove what they already know they did. The wind moved through the cottonwoods behind the house. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked once and gave up. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I don't want a war, I whispered. Caleb kissed my hair. Then don't start one. Just stop walking into theirs unarmed. The next morning, Mom sent another message. Can we talk today, sweetheart? Like grown women. I stood there with my coffee cooling in my hand, reading those last 3 words. In my family, grown woman meant one woman was about to be asked to swallow the truth so another could keep smiling. Mom called at 2:43 p.m. I remember the time because I looked at the greenhouse clock while wiping rosemary oil from my hands. Sunlight fell through the glass roof in warm squares, catching dust, pollen, and the white orchid Audrey had sent me. I pressed record before I answered. Hi, Mom. Marin, sweetheart. Her voice came sweet and careful. I want you to hear me with an open heart. That was never a request. It was a warning. She talked for 3-4 minutes before saying what she meant. Audrey was fragile. Grant was overwhelmed. The gala had become more important than expected. Investors were flying in. The whole weekend needed emotional balance. Then she sighed. Your father won't be walking you down the aisle. The room seemed to narrow. I looked at the orchid. White petals, cut stem, no roots. Why? I asked, though I already knew. If Martin walks you down in front of everyone, Audrey will feel like she's being replaced, Mom said. You know how hard the season has been for her marriage. My wedding makes Audrey feel replaced? Marin, don't twist this. I'm asking. You're a modern woman. Many brides walk themselves down the aisle now. It can be empowering. There it was. She had turned abandonment into feminism. Before I could answer, Dad's voice came through the speaker, distant and weak. Honey, your mother may be right. I closed my eyes. Dad, I said, is that what you want? A pause. Too long for love, too short for courage. I just don't want your sister hurt, he said. You've always been stronger than Audrey. The words landed where old bruises lived. I saw myself at 12, standing beside my science fair board about Montana root systems, pretending not to look at the 2 empty chairs in the front row. I saw my teacher squeezing my shoulder. I saw Mom later, carrying Audrey's cheer bag, saying, "You won first place anyway, honey. Audrey needed us more." Needed more. Those 2 words had eaten half my childhood. I wanted to shout. I wanted to ask Dad why my joy had always been easier to miss than Audrey's discomfort. I wanted to tell Mom that strength was not a family storage unit where everyone dumped what they refused to carry. Instead, I said, "I understand." Mom exhaled with relief. "I knew you would." No, I thought. You hoped I would disappear neatly. "I have to get back to work," I said. "Send Audrey a kind text later," Mom added. "She feels awful about all this." Of course she did. Audrey always felt awful from the safest chair in the room. I hung up. For a while, I stood still enough to hear the irrigation line ticking behind the benches. Then my hand moved. I saved the file to receipts. My thumb hovered over Caleb's name before I typed. Mom convinced Dad not to walk me down the aisle. Audrey feels overshadowed. His reply came less than a minute later. "Don't move yet. I'm calling Natalie." I read it twice. Not calm down. Not let it go. Not maybe they mean well. Don't move yet. For the first time that day, I felt something steadier than grief. I set the phone down and picked up the orchid. Audrey had chosen the most elegant flower she could send, but the stem had already softened. Beauty without roots could survive only in a vase, and only for a little while. I carried it to the compost bin behind the greenhouse. Then I washed my hands. Brooke Ellis called while I was sealing a box of cedar lavender balm for a resort outside Big Sky. Brooke managed events at the Bozeman Botanical Gardens, the place where Caleb and I were supposed to marry under eucalyptus, white roses, and a sky wide enough to forgive almost anything. Her voice was too controlled. "Marin," she said, "are you alone?" I set the tape gun down. "Mostly. Why?" "Grant Barnes came by my office this morning." The room cooled around me. "He did what?" "He asked what it would cost to release the garden for Saturday evening." I gripped the edge of the table. "Release it?" "He said your family had decided the venue would be better used for Audrey and Grant's anniversary gala. He called it an expedited cancellation consideration." Of course he did. Grant could put a silk tie on a snake and call it formal wear. "Brooke, I never agreed to that." "I know," she said quickly. "That's why I'm calling you." She told me he had placed a cream envelope on her desk. Cash. Not enough to impress a professional venue, but enough to insult one. Then he smiled that polished smile and said everybody had a price when the weekend was busy. My face went hot. "That's not all," Brooke said. I heard paper moving near her phone. He emailed an authorization letter. It says, "You approve transferring the Saturday evening event block to Barnes Development for a private investor gala." I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because my body needed somewhere to put the shock. "It has my name?" "It has an electronic signature reading Marin Whitlock." I closed my eyes. I never signed that way. Every contract, every invoice, every bank document carried the same legal signature. Marin E. Whitlock. Brooke already knew that. She was sharp, careful, and allergic to nonsense dressed as urgency. "The email didn't come from your registered address," she continued. "It came from a Barnes Development domain. The file has no proper audit trail, no timestamp chain, no verification certificate. And your contract requires any venue change to be requested directly from the bride or groom
through the original booking email.
Did he think you wouldn't check? I think he thought Cash made checking impolite. That sounded like Grant.
Brooke lowered her voice. I preserved the email. I saved the attachment. We have lobby camera footage of him coming in with the envelope. I also noted that I refused any change to your contract. For a moment, I could not speak. Not because I was weak.
Because there is a special kind of silence that comes when someone tries to erase you with your own name. I'm coming over, I said. No, another voice said behind me. I turned. Natalie Rourke stood at the greenhouse door in a charcoal blazer, dark hair pulled back, sunglasses in one hand. Caleb's older sister looked like she had walked out of a Chicago boardroom and into my little storm with a file folder for a shield. How did you get here? I asked. Caleb called. She stepped inside. And you are not driving angry to confront a desperate man in a public venue. Brooke heard her and said, Is that Natalie? It is, Natalie replied, taking the phone from my hand as if we had rehearsed it. Brooke, don't forward anything broadly. Send copies to Marin and me. Preserve originals. Keep camera footage. Make a written incident note while the timing is fresh. Brooke exhaled. Already started. Good. And don't use the word fraud in casual emails. Write unauthorized electronic signature and potential civil exposure. I stared at Natalie. She covered the phone and looked at me. Paper can be a weapon, Marin, but in the right hands, it can also be a shield. My knees felt strange, so I sat on the packing stool. Grant had not only tried to steal my wedding venue, he had tried to make it look like I handed it over willingly. Natalie ended the call and placed my phone on the table. Now, she said, calm as a judge, we build the record. Outside, the Montana wind pressed against the greenhouse glass. For once, I did not feel trapped inside it. Natalie drove us to the botanical gardens first. Brooke met us in her office with her hair clipped up and her laptop already open. The gardens outside the window were being watered for Saturday. Rows of white roses and green arches waiting like they still believed in uncomplicated joy. Brooke printed the email from Grant, the attachment, the booking contract, and the clause requiring changes from my registered address. She also saved the lobby footage to a secure drive. I'm sorry, Marin, she said. I shook my head. You protected my wedding. I protected a contract, she replied, then softened. And yes, your wedding.
Natalie slid the papers into a folder. No social media, no angry calls, no hallway confrontation. If Grant wants to act clever, we let him be documented. I had spent my life explaining feelings to people committed to misunderstanding them. Documentation felt almost holy.
By the time we left, my stomach was twisting hard enough that Natalie steered me toward a bistro on Main Street. It had brick walls, black coffee, tomato soup, grilled cheese with sourdough, and locals pretending not to eavesdrop. I had just taken my first bite when the bell over the door rang. Mom walked in with Audrey. Of course she did. Audrey wore cream linen and oversized sunglasses pushed into her hair. Mom carried a folder of fabric swatches, champagne and blush and pale gold, Gala colors, wedding-adjacent colors. Audrey spotted me and smiled like a woman discovering she had been given a stage. Marin, she said, coming over. How funny. We were just finalizing flowers.
The mom touched Audrey's elbow. Your sister has been under such pressure. Natalie looked up from her coffee but said nothing. Audrey's eyes moved to the folder beside Natalie. Wedding stuff? Contracts, Natalie said. Audrey laughed lightly. That sounds like you, Marin. Always making everything so serious. I set my spoon down. A signed venue contract is serious. Mom sighed. Soft, public, perfect. Sweetheart, no one is trying to hurt you.
Audrey and Grant are fighting for their marriage. Sometimes family means being generous when it's inconvenient. Inconvenient, I repeated.
Audrey tilted her head. My gala isn't about competing with you. No one at the table believed that, not even her. Then she added, besides, your flowers are mostly local greenery, right? I'm sure they'll be sweet. We're bringing in orchids from California. Grant says investors notice details. I thought of the dying orchid in my compost bin. Mom smiled sadly at me. Please don't make this weekend heavier. Audrey is trying to hold her life together. You have Caleb. You have your little business. You're steady. My little business. Nally put down her cup. Mrs. Whitlock, she said, you're calling favoritism compassion because it sounds cleaner. The table went silent. Mom blinked once. Excuse me? Nally's voice stayed calm. You are not protecting one daughter. You are spending the other one. Audrey's mouth opened. You don't know our family history. No, Nally said, but I understand patterns. Mom's face changed so quickly, most people would have missed it. The softness slipped, and something colder looked through. Marin, she said, are you really going to let someone speak to your mother this way? There it was, the old leash. I looked at Natalie, then back at Mom. She didn't say anything untrue. Audrey made a wounded sound, practiced and pretty. Mom gathered the swatches to her chest as if we had attacked her with them. For once, I did not apologize to make the room breathable again. Natalie stood and picked up the contracts. Enjoy your flowers. I followed her out into the bright Montana afternoon. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in my life, the truth had not left me standing alone. Warren Pike arrived just after 3, carrying a paper bag from a bakery and walking with the slow confidence of a man who had never needed to impress a room. Brought those molasses cookies you pretend not to like, he said. I smiled despite myself. I don't pretend. I like them. I just have dignity. He chuckled and set the bag on my workbench. To most people, Warren looked like any older rancher from Gallatin County. Faded canvas coat, silver hair under a beat-up Stetson, boots that had seen more mud than marble. But 2 years earlier, his best breeding mare had nearly gone lame from a stubborn hoof infection. I had made a plant-based salve using cottonwood bud, calendula, beeswax, and a bitter extract that smelled terrible and worked beautifully. Warren never forgot. After that, he ordered custom formulations for guest cabins, lodge spas, and private ranch clients who paid without asking for discounts. He treated my work like science before my own family treated it like work. He took one look at my face and stopped reaching for a cookie. Who do I need to dislike? He asked. The question was so plain it almost broke me. I told him enough. Mom, Dad, Audrey, Grant, the gala, the call, the venue, the unauthorized signature. I kept my voice steady until I said Grant's full name. Warren set his coffee down. Grant Barnes? Yes. His jaw shifted once. That boy has been begging me for an easement for 8 months. I stared at him. You're the rancher? I'm the dinosaur, he said dryly. For one wild second, I wanted to laugh. Grant had spent dinner mocking the man who held the strip of land his entire project needed. Warren looked toward the greenhouse rows where lavender starts waited in black trays. He wants a road cut through the quietest part of my western pasture, he said. Claims it will bring progress. Mostly it brings headlights, runoff, and men like him pretending concrete is character. I folded my arms around myself. I didn't know.
Why would you? Unlike your brother-in-law, I don't introduce myself by my balance sheet. Then his expression hardened. A man who tries to steal a bride's venue would not be trusted with the road through my land. The sentence settled into the greenhouse like a door closing. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Mom. Marin, we need to discuss reception seating. Since your father and I contributed to the flowers, I think it's fair to make room for Grant's key investors near the front. The Rourkes won't mind moving a few of their people. Family should support family. I read it twice, then laughed once under my breath. The flower contribution was $535. She had mentioned it 3 times that week, as if it purchased steering rights to my wedding. Warren watched me. Bad news? Old news wearing a new dress. I typed one word. No. Mom's reply came almost immediately. Don't be difficult, sweetheart. I did not answer. Warren nodded at the phone. Sometimes the cleanest fence line is the one you stop moving. If you've ever watched someone like Marin get called selfish for finally protecting herself, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you tell her to do? Keep listening, because Elaine, Audrey, and Grant have no idea who is really standing behind the bride. After Warren left, I sat at my desk and pulled out my checkbook. I wrote Elaine Whitlock a check for $535. In the memo line, I wrote, "Floral contribution refund." My hand did not shake. I placed it in the cream envelope and sealed it, but I did not mail it. Not yet. For most of my life, money in our family had come with invisible strings. A dinner paid for meant silence. A favor meant obedience. A small contribution meant ownership. I held the envelope against my palm and understood that I was not returning money. I was returning the leash. Mom canceled at 8:12 a.m. Audrey's nail appointment got moved, and the Gala centerpieces are the wrong champagne tone. I need to be with her this morning. Send pictures, sweetheart. You look beautiful in anything. Beautiful in anything. It was the kind of compliment that required no chair beside me, no mother trying not to cry in a room full of satin. I set the phone face down beside my untouched toast. Caleb came in with coffee. He saw my face. Elaine? I nodded. Audrey's flowers are emotionally unstable. His jaw tightened. Want me to come? For a second, I did. Then I imagined him sitting among lace and mirrors, trying to fill a mother-shaped absence. That was too much to ask of love. No, I said. I'll be okay. He kissed my forehead. Okay is allowed to be ugly today. The bridal boutique sat off Main Street, with tall windows and a bell that sounded too cheerful when I walked in alone. Paige, the consultant, smiled as if she had not noticed the empty chair behind me. My dress waited in a white garment bag, ivory crepe, clean lines, botanical lace climbing from the waist to one shoulder, like vines finding light. When I first chose it, Mom had called it simple, which in her language meant unimpressive. Paige helped me step into it. The zipper rose. For one breath, I did not see the daughter nobody picked first. I saw a woman who had built a company from soil, heat, and patience. A woman who had survived conditional love and still knew how to love well. Then Paige lifted the veil near my hair, and my eyes filled. I'm sorry, I whispered. She handed me a tissue. Happens every day. But this was grief wearing satin. I was not crying because Mom missed one fitting. I was crying because some childish part of me had still expected her to show up differently at the last minute. The bell rang. Natalie Rourke walked in wearing black trousers, a cream blouse, and the expression of a woman who had already chosen her side. She held 2 coffees in a small paper bag. I brought reinforcements, she said.
caffeine, and almond croissants. She did not call me poor thing. She set the coffee down, looked at the dress, and nodded once. That, she said, is the right dress. Natalie circled me like a counsel reviewing final language. 1/2 inch at the waist, plain veil, no necklace. Let the lace speak. I laughed through the last of my tears. You sound terrifyingly certain. I bill by certainty. When Paige mentioned the rush alteration fee, I reached for my purse. Natalie was faster. No, I said. You don't have to. She signed the receipt. I know. Natalie, she met my eyes in the mirror. Your mother chose where to stand today. So did I.
The words did not heal everything, but they put a hand under something inside me that had been falling for years. After the fitting, I sat in my car with the dress hanging in the back. I slid the $535 check into a cream envelope. Memo: floral contribution refund. For a long time, I looked at Elaine Whitlock's name in blue ink. Then I sealed the envelope. The dress was mine. The day was mine. And keeping it that way finally felt worth the cost. I met Caleb and Natalie at the Rourke cabin just after 2. The place sat beneath the Bridger Mountains, all pine beams, stone fireplace, and windows wide enough to make the sky feel invited. A folder waited on the kitchen table. Thick paper, neat tabs. My stomach tightened before anyone spoke. Caleb noticed. This is not about distrust, he said.
Natalie pulled out a chair for me. It's a prenup, Marin, but not the kind television makes people throw wine over. I almost smiled. Almost.
In my family, documents had always meant leverage. Mom saved receipts for gifts so she could remind you later. Grant hid greed behind legal words. Dad signed whatever kept dinner quiet. So when I saw my name beside Caleb's, something old inside me stepped back. Caleb sat across from me, not beside Natalie. That mattered.
I want Root and Ember protected, he said. Your formulas, your intellectual property, your ownership, your future contracts. If anything ever happens between us, I don't want my name anywhere near what you built before me. I looked down at my hands. He continued. I want what you built protected from everyone, even me.
That sentence did something no diamond ring had done. It made me feel seen as more than a bride. Natalie walked me through each section. Separate property, business valuation, no forced sale, no claim to proprietary formulas, no pressure to merge accounts tied to company operations. Paper can be a weapon, she said, tapping the folder, but in the right hands, it can also be a shield. I signed with my full legal name, Marin E. Whitlock. Not because I expected failure, but because I finally understood protection did not insult love. It honored the work love should never consume. That evening, the rehearsal dinner was held at a lodge tucked below the mountains. There were wildflowers in mason jars, roast beef, buttered green beans, huckleberry pie, and local wine poured by Caleb's uncle, who told every story too loudly and somehow made that charming. The Rourkes hugged me like I had not wandered in late, but arrived exactly when expected. Caleb's mother fixed a loose pin in my hair. His younger cousin asked if she could smell the lavender balm in my purse. An elderly aunt pressed my hand and said, "Tomorrow, you walk toward the people who came." I tried not to look at the table near the window. 4 chairs sat empty. Elaine, Martin, Audrey, Grant. Their name cards looked almost embarrassed. For the first 30 minutes, I told myself they were running late. For the next 20, I told myself reception was bad in the mountains. Hope is strange. It will keep setting a place for people who already ate somewhere else. Near dessert, I went to the restroom and opened Instagram. Audrey's story filled the screen. She stood between Mom and Grant at a downtown steakhouse, champagne raised, gold earrings flashing. Dad hovered behind them with a smile that looked borrowed. Around them were men in suits I recognized from Grant's investor talk. The caption read, "Family is whoever supports your dreams." My thumb went cold. I took a screenshot and saved it to receipts. When I returned, Caleb knew before I spoke. I handed him the phone. He stared at the image. No anger showed on his face, and somehow that made him look more dangerous. He kissed my knuckles once, then stood. "I need to make a call," he said. Through the lodge window, I watched him step into the dark, the mountains rising behind him like witnesses that had finally had enough. Through the lodge window, I watched Caleb stand under the porch light with his phone to his ear. The mountains behind him were black against the last blue of the sky. He did not pace. He barely moved. That was how I knew something had shifted. Natalie came to stand beside me, her arms folded. "Is he calling David?" I asked. "Yes." "Who's David?" "David Crane, financial counsel for Rourke Meridian Holdings." The name landed strangely in my ear. I knew Caleb's family had money. I knew there were holdings, land, old investments, things he spoke of only when needed. But Caleb had never made wealth part of his personality. He preferred trail maps to boardrooms, diner coffee to private clubs. Natalie looked at me. "Marin, Caleb isn't just connected to the company." My throat tightened. "He runs it," she said. "He's CEO." Outside, Caleb lowered his head slightly, listening. I thought of Grant laughing over steak, calling him trail guy, asking when he would get a real job. I thought of Caleb sitting there with calm hands, letting ignorance perform itself. Natalie continued. "Rourke Meridian holds a portion of Grant's mezzanine debt on the West Bozeman project. Caleb kept the file quiet because he did not want business pressure touching your wedding." I looked back at the empty chairs by the window. My family had skipped my rehearsal dinner to drink champagne with the man whose project was alive, partly because Caleb had chosen not to pull the string. Caleb came back inside 10 minutes later. His face was gentle when he looked at me, but not soft. "Grant has been out of compliance for 3 months," he said. "Liquidity covenant." David confirmed it. "What does that mean?" "It means he promises lenders he would maintain certain cash reserves and ratios. He didn't, more than once." "And you knew?" "I knew there were problems. I didn't know he had tried to take your venue until today." His jaw tightened once. "We extended courtesy because of you." Because of me. Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they made Audrey's Instagram caption burn brighter in my mind. "Family is whoever supports your dreams." Grant had been using my wedding weekend to support his lie. Caleb took my hand. "The courtesy ends tonight." He did not say it like revenge. He said it like a door being locked. I nodded once. "What happens now?" "David prepares notice of default. It goes out Monday morning. The primary lender gets notified. After that, Grant has to answer for his own numbers." Natalie added, "Clean process, no theatrics, no personal threats. Just the contract he signed." For the first time all day, I breathed all the way in. The next morning, June 21st arrived bright and shamelessly beautiful. I was sitting in the bridal suite with my dress hanging on the wardrobe when Mom texted. "Breakfast at the country club is running long. We'll come, but we'll sit near the back so we can slip out after the vows. Audrey needs me before the gala." "You've always been the understanding one." I read it twice. No apology, no question. Just another instruction wrapped in a compliment. My purse sat open on the vanity. Inside was the cream envelope with the $535 check. For a moment, I saw myself mailing it, making everything tidy, giving Mom one last proof that I could be fair even when she had not been. Then I opened my banking app. Stop payment. Reason? Services no longer required. The confirmation time appeared on the screen, 8:45 a.m. I set the phone down and looked at my wedding dress. For 31 years, I have been trained to make abandonment easier for the people abandoning me. Not today. From the bridal suite, I could see the gravel drive curving toward the gardens. Grant's Porsche arrived first, shining like it had been polished for an audience. He stepped out in a navy suit, checked his cufflinks, then looked around as if counting who mattered. Audrey followed. Her dress was champagne satin, not white enough to accuse, but close enough to understand. It hugged her body, shimmered in the sun, and carried the exact message she would deny if challenged. Mom moved toward her at once. Elaine Whitlock smoothed Audrey's hair, adjusted one strap, and brushed invisible lint from her shoulder. Dad stood nearby with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. No one looked up at my window. I stood behind the curtain in my ivory dress and felt strangely calm. Not healed, not numb, just finished. Paige, the stylist, fixed the last pin in my veil. You ready? Before I could answer, more cars turned into the drive. Black SUVs, a silver sedan, then another. Men and women stepped out in tailored suits, summer dresses, and polished boots. I recognized a county commissioner from a newspaper photo, a hotel group executive I had once pitched to, 2 attorneys Natalie had greeted by first name, a woman who chaired a land conservation board. Grant noticed them too. Through the glass, I saw his smile return in pieces. He leaned toward Audrey, probably telling her his investors had arrived. Mom brightened. Even from above, I could read her face. She thought Grant had brought power to my wedding by accident, and that she might still borrow it. Then Caleb appeared near the garden arch, speaking to those guests like they belonged to him. Grant's smile stalled. The coordinator knocked softly. Marin, 5 minutes. My body remembered Dad was supposed to be outside that door. My childhood had pictured his arm waiting for mine. Even after everything, grief came looking for that picture. The hallway stayed empty. Then footsteps approached. Not Dad's. Warren Pike turned the corner in a midnight blue suit, his Stetson replaced by silver hair neatly combed back. He looked older and taller somehow, like the land itself had decided to dress formally. He stopped in front of me, eyes kind but steady. Miss Whitlock, he said, Caleb told me your father was unable to make the walk. Unable. A generous word. I swallowed. He made another choice. Warren nodded as if that mattered. Then he offered his arm. If your father cannot make the walk, I would be honored to stand where honor is needed. For the first time that morning, tears threatened me. I looked at his hand, weathered and clean, the hand of a man who had never owed me anything and still showed up better than the man who did. Thank you, Mr. Pike, I whispered. Warren, he said. Today, call me Warren. The doors opened. Every head turned. I heard the small gasp ripple through the garden before I saw why. Mom's face had gone pale. Dad looked as if someone had read his private shame aloud. Audrey's lips parted. Grant's eyes locked on Warren and lost every drop of color. The dinosaur, the rancher, the man whose land stood between Grant Barnes and the future he had been selling on borrowed money. Warren held my arm with quiet dignity, neither rushing nor performing. We walked past rows of white roses and eucalyptus, past country club whispers, past the family that had placed itself near the back and suddenly wished it could vanish there. I did not look at Dad. Not because I hated him, because for once, I did not need to check whether he regretted failing me. At the end of the aisle, Caleb waited beneath the arch. His eyes found mine, and everything loud inside me went still.
Warren placed my hand in Caleb's. "Take good care of her," he said. Caleb answered, "She has done that her whole life. I intend to stand beside her while she does." And just like that, I stopped feeling like a daughter being given away. I felt like a woman arriving. The ceremony passed in a blur of sunlight and breath.
Caleb's hands were warm around mine. When he said his vows, he did not promise to save me. He promised to stand where truth stood, even when it cost him comfort. That mattered more. "I will never call your silence peace," he said, his voice low enough for me and clear enough for the front rows. "And I will never mistake your strength for permission to leave you alone." My throat closed. When it was my turn, I looked at him and not at the back row. "I spent years believing love had to be earned by being easy," I said. "You taught me love can be steady without asking me to shrink." The officiant smiled. The wind moved through the eucalyptus. Caleb kissed me, and the garden rose to its feet. For one suspended moment, I forgot Elaine, Martin, Audrey, and Grant were there at all. Then the reception began. The tent stood on the lawn behind the gardens, dressed in white linen, greenery, brass lanterns, and Montana summer light. Servers passed smoked trout crostini, deviled eggs with paprika, and little glasses of huckleberry lemonade. A bluegrass trio played near the bar. I saw Mom scanning the seating chart. Her face changed. Not dramatically. Elaine was too polished for that. But her mouth tightened, and her shoulders drew back as if someone had touched her with a cold spoon. Table 19, near the kitchen entrance. Not hidden, not insulted, just far from the center. Exactly where I had been placed my whole life. Dad adjusted his tie and said something I could not hear. Audrey stared at the chart like it was a personal attack. Grant looked around quickly, measuring who noticed. Plenty did. Mom had spent years seating me at the emotional folding table of our family. Now she had a real chair at the edge of mine. Caleb came beside me with 2 glasses of sparkling water. "Too much?" I looked across the tent as Mom sat stiffly while a server passed behind her with a tray of dinner rolls. "No," I said. "Accurate." He almost smiled. Audrey lasted 8 minutes before trying to reclaim attention. She laughed too loudly at nothing, crossed her legs so her champagne dress caught the light, and mentioned her gala to a woman from the conservation board. The woman only said, "How nice," and then turned to ask me about Root and Ember's calendula extraction process. Audrey's smile curdled. Grant, meanwhile, had found Warren at the bar. I saw him approach with the same smooth shoulders he used when asking for things he had not earned. Warren listened for maybe 10 seconds, expression flat, glass untouched in his hand. Then Nally stepped between them. She wore deep green and looked like a contract with cheekbones. "Mr. Barnes," she said pleasantly, "I don't believe this is the right venue for business requests." Grant's smile twitched. "Natalie, right? Caleb's sister?" "Lead counsel for Rourke Meridian Holdings," she corrected. Grant blinked. The bluegrass music carried on, cheerful and merciless. Nally tilted her head. "I believe your debt file crossed my desk before your champagne did." Grant's hand froze around his glass. Across the tent, Mom stood halfway from her chair, sensing danger without knowing its shape. Audrey looked from Grant to Natalie, confused that the room was no longer bending toward her. I did not move. For once, I let other people finish what their own arrogance had started. Grant leaned closer to Natalie, his voice dropping. "What exactly has Caleb told you?" Natalie smiled without warmth. Enough to know you should enjoy the meal, she said. It may be the last complimentary thing you receive for a while. Grant looked toward Caleb. Caleb was standing beside me, calm, clean-shaven, wearing a black suit and the quiet expression of a man who did not need to introduce himself twice. At table 19, Mom finally understood that the back of the room was not far enough to hide from consequences. Grant did not speak to Warren again. He returned to table 19 with the careful walk of a man crossing thin ice. Audrey leaned close, whispering fast. Mom watched him, then watched Caleb, then watched Natalie. I could almost see the math happening behind her eyes. Caleb was not a trail guy. Warren was not just an old rancher. And I was not the small daughter she could keep folding into the corner. Dinner was served under warm lantern light. Herb roasted chicken, trout with lemon butter, summer vegetables, and huckleberry salad. People talked softly, laughed easily, and every now and then someone came to our table to congratulate me on the ceremony. Not us, me. That small distinction seemed to bother Audrey more than the food. When the toast began, Caleb's best friend went first, telling a story about getting lost in a snowstorm and watching Caleb stay calm enough to make fear feel foolish. Natalie followed with a sharp, funny speech that made the tent laugh and made me cry only once. Then Warren stood. The room settled before he lifted his glass. I am not family by blood, he began, which, after watching today, may be one of my advantages. A ripple of laughter moved through the tent. Mom did not laugh. Warren looked at me. 2 years ago, a mare of mine nearly went lame. Expensive animal, proud animal, stubborn as any creature on my ranch. I had veterinarians, specialists, and plenty of opinions. What solved the problem came from a young woman in a greenhouse who treated plant science like sacred work. My cheeks warmed. She did not oversell. She did not flatter. She explained the formulation, the risks, the limits, and the follow-up schedule. That is rare in business, rarer in people. The tent had gone very quiet. Warren continued. 6 months ago, Pike Caldwell Hospitality Group signed a 3-year exclusive supply agreement with Mayor Whitlock and Root and Ember Botanicals. Mom's posture changed. Warren's voice grew stronger. The total contract value is $4.75 million, tied to quarterly delivery, quality audits, and performance milestones. It is not a favor. It is not a wedding gift. It is earned business. For one heartbeat, no one moved. Then the applause began. It rose from the front tables first, then spread until the tent filled with it. People stood. Caleb squeezed my hand beneath the table. I heard someone behind me say, "Good for her." Good for her. Not poor Marin. Not strong Marin. Not understanding Marin. Good for her. At table 19, Audrey looked stunned, like someone had changed the rules of gravity. Grant stared at his plate. Dad's eyes were wet, but I could not tell if it was pride or shame. Mom's face had gone smooth, dangerously smooth. The moment Warren sat down, Elaine stood. She moved quickly toward the coordinator, smile already arranged. I knew that smile. It was the one she wore before turning someone else's success into proof of her motherhood. I like to say a few words as mother of the bride, she said. The coordinator, Brooke's assistant, checked her clipboard. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitlock, she replied gently. You're not listed for a toast. Mom's smile flickered. There must be a mistake. No, ma'am. We were told your party planned to leave after the vows. The sentence was polite. It was also a blade. A few nearby guests heard it. Audrey did too. Her face flushed scarlet. Grant pushed back his chair. Mom stood there with her mouth slightly open, caught inside the very excuse she had given me that morning. For once, she had no daughter's silence to cover her. Audrey grabbed a clutch. "Grant, we're leaving." He rose too fast, knocking his napkin to the grass. No one chased them. No one begged them to stay. Mom looked at me across the lantern-lit tent. I lifted my glass of sparkling water. Not in a toast, in acknowledgement. She had taught me how to sit at the edge of a room. I had simply returned the lesson. By Sunday night, Caleb and I were already in Costa Rica, listening to rain hit the roof of a small villa above the trees. For 12 hours, my phone stayed quiet. Then Monday came. At 9:03 a.m. Montana time, Warren Pike's attorney delivered a formal refusal of the easement grant needed for the West Bozeman project. The letter was short, clean, and devastating. It cited lack of business trust, ethical concerns, and Grant's attempted interference with a contracted private event. No shouting, no insult, just a locked gate. At 10:40, Rourke Meridian Holdings sent notice of default on Grant's mezzanine debt. David Crane copied the primary lender. The reason was not personal, no matter how Grant would later tell it. He had violated his liquidity covenant for 3 consecutive months. Caleb had not created the fire. He had only stopped covering the smoke. By noon, Grant's investors were calling each other instead of him. By 3, Audrey's Gala vendors wanted payment up front. The florist, the caterer, the lighting company, the jazz trio from Billings. Grant's corporate card declined twice before the caterer stopped pretending it was a machine error. I know because Audrey texted me at 3:17. "What did you do?" I stared at those 4 words while a toucan called somewhere beyond the wet leaves. I did not answer. Then Mom called. Once, twice, 9 times. Her voicemail arrived in pieces. "Marin, sweetheart, something has happened with Grant's project. Your father and I are being dragged into this. I know Saturday was emotional, but family does not punish family." Not once did she say, "I am sorry." Later that evening, Caleb sat beside me on the balcony while fog moved through the trees. "You don't have to listen," he said. I know, but I listened anyway, not because I wanted to suffer, but because I wanted to hear the shape of the truth when nobody could decorate it. Dad's voicemail was worse. "Marin," he said, voice thin and shaking. "I don't understand all the papers. Grant said it was a family investment trust. Your mother thought it was smart. We may lose a house if this keeps going. Please, talk to Caleb." I closed my eyes. The house. The white 2-story house with blue shutters where Audrey's prom pictures had been taken on the porch. The house where Mom told guests my company was charming. The house where Dad had taught me how to patch drywall, but not how to expect protection from him. Caleb's jaw tightened. They signed a HELOC and second mortgage package tied to Grant's LLC. David found cross guarantees. "In English," I said. They borrowed against their home to feed Grant's project. He dressed it up. They didn't read it closely enough, or didn't want to. Of course, they had not been living on Grant's success. They had been spinning their own roof and calling it Audrey's victory. Audrey texted next. "You need to fix this. We are sisters." Sisters. A word she used like a spare key. I set the phone face down. Caleb waited. He did not tell me what to feel. He never made my mercy his performance. "If you want," he said, "I can ask David what options exist. A pause, a restructure, something temporary." For years, that sentence would have broken me. I would have rushed in, paid something, signed something, softened something. I would have called it love because they did. But I saw the orchid again. Beautiful, rootless,
already dying. I heard Dad saying, "You've always been stronger." I heard Mom telling a coordinator she would leave after my vows. I looked at my husband.
Let them carry what they signed.
The rain kept falling through the dark. For the first time in my life, I did not run toward the sound of my family's consequences and mistake it for my name. Costa Rica was green in a way Montana never tried to be. Rain moved through the jungle every afternoon, soft at first, then heavy enough to hush the world. Caleb and I drank coffee on a wooden balcony, while my phone filled with messages I did not open right away. Guilt is strange. It can sound like love when you were raised to serve it. On the fourth morning, I finally said, "What if I'm becoming cruel?" Caleb looked at me over his mug. "You didn't lose your mother this week, Mirren. You stopped pretending she was the mother you needed." The words hurt because they fit. If I saved Elaine now, she would not see my mercy. She would see a new wallet where Grant's lie had collapsed. 2 weeks later, I returned to Root and Ember's new production space outside Bozeman. Stainless tables, climate-controlled storage, shelves of labeled botanicals, and shipment schedules for Pike Caldwell's first quarterly order. It smelled like lavender, wax, and work that was finally being respected. At 10:20 a.m., Tessa called from the lobby. "Marin," she whispered, "your family is here. They walked past reception." I did not hurry. Elaine stood near the display wall, mascara smudged, but pearls still on. Dad looked smaller than I remembered. Audrey's hair was pulled back too tightly. Grant's suit had lost its arrogance. Mom stepped forward first. "Sweetheart, we need to talk as a family." "No," I said. "You need money and influence. That is different." Audrey snapped. "You're destroying my life." "I didn't ruin your life," I said. "I stopped funding the lie that held it together." Grant looked past me. "Where's Caleb?" "Not your exit door." Dad tried to straighten. "Marin, I am still your father." I opened the portfolio Natalie had prepared and laid the pages on the table. Mom's text, the missed fitting, Audrey's Instagram story, Grant's venue email, the unauthorized signature, Brooke's incident note, the recording of Dad choosing Audrey's feelings over my aisle. Then one more file. "When I was 18, I said, Mom opened a store credit account in my name to help build my credit. Natalie found the records. Prom dress, salon charges, a cheer trip deposit, all for Audrey. Late payments damaged my score before I even understood what had been done." Dad stared at Elaine. She whispered, "I was trying to help your sister." "No," I said. "You turned Audrey's wants into my debts." Audrey's face twisted. "You always act like I asked for everything." "You didn't have to. You enjoyed what silence gave you." I looked at Dad next. "You weren't blind. You were comfortable being weak." His mouth trembled, but no defense came. Finally, I faced Mom. "You called favoritism compassion because it sounded cleaner. But strong doesn't mean disposable, Mom. It never did." Elaine reached for my hand. I stepped back. "Chessa," I called. "Please ask security to escort them out. If they come back without an appointment, document it as trespassing." No one screamed. That almost made it harder. They left quietly, 4 people carrying the weight they had spent years handing to me. Months later, Grant filed bankruptcy. Audrey divorced him and took a job in a boutique where she once bought dresses to impress strangers. Dad and Mom lost the house after the foreclosure process ran its course. I heard Elaine found the $535 check in a drawer and tried to cash it for groceries. The teller told her it had been stopped at 8:45 a.m. on June 21st, my wedding morning. 6 months after all of it,
I stood in Paradise Valley on 47 acres of young lavender. Warren rode along the fence line on the mare I had once helped save. Caleb came up behind me with coffee and kissed my shoulder. For years, I begged my family to water roots they had no intention of seeing. Now I had soil of my own. Boundaries are not walls. They are gates, and I hold the key. The lesson is simple. Love should not require you to disappear, and family should never be an excuse to drain the one person who keeps giving. Protect your peace, protect your name, and never confuse guilt with duty. If this story moved you, please leave a like for the channel. If you have thoughts or advice, share them in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. Thank you for staying until the end. I wish you health, peace, and strength, and I'll meet you again in the next story on Revenge Glow.